时空奥德赛这次全球封闭测试开始时间为2025年6月24日下午3点到6月23日下午3点结束。因为跟新世界很像 ，PVPVE 都很全面，老外以及高品质游戏玩家都喜欢这种自由度很高、含自由交易，可以吸引现今网络游戏群体知道的玩家搬装党。我看了很多资料，感觉有潜力成为一款高品质的爆款 MMO， 所以这次测试肯定是要提前玩的，到时候会直播，到时候欢迎来看或者一起开荒。这张思维导图是接下来的视频内容总结，基本封测能玩到的全职业玩法以及所有武器技能和技能介绍都单独拎出来讲了。因为我没参与提前测试，所以这个视频素材是搬运国外的，但他讲得很细，有兴趣的可以看一下。那掐个饭，我们开始视频。外服游戏需要加速器，可以用迅速加速，老品牌加速稳定。上方还有大学生优惠9米1个月，这里口令兑换输入分1，还有3天免费时长。
At time of recording, Chrono Odyssey features 6 different classes, and each one of these classes has 3 weapons available to them. However, unlike in New World and Throne of Liberty, in Chrono Odyssey, these weapons are strictly locked to the class you choose in character creation. So for example, if you want to play with bow, you'll only be able to do so by picking the Ranger class. Now in terms of the Holy Trinity, that being tank, damage, and healer, there are certainly particular classes that lend themselves more to the role due to the abilities and playstyles of the weapons available to them. For example, those of you who are interested in tanking, the Swordsman is likely the best option to choose due to the Sword and Shield and Dual Blades having access to several taunt abilities and passives that increase threat generation. Healing in Chrono seems to be something that's currently reserved to just the Sorcerer and the Paladin class, as if you take a look at the description of the Mana Sphere, which belongs to the Sorcerer, or for the Mace, which belongs to the Paladin, they both reference some description of healing. Unfortunately though, both the Sorcerer and the Paladin will not be playable in the upcoming June 20th beta, and neither will the Assassin. So in today's video, we're just going to focus on the weapons, playstyles, and mechanics of the 3 playable classes we can check out: the Berserker, the Ranger, and the Swordsman. Every playable class in Chrono Odyssey will use some combination of health, or stamina, or vigor in order to be able to cast their abilities. Health is exactly what you would imagine it to be. You lose it when you're taking damage. You can replenish it with potions, consumables, certain abilities. Stamina is also pretty much what you would expect it to be. You can use it for dodging, you can use it for blocking if your weapon allows blocking, and you can also use it sometimes to cast certain abilities. They have a stamina cost incurred to them. When it comes to dodging, there is a difference in types of dodges that you can do. You can do a light dodge roll, you can do a dash, or you can do like a little hop. And this depends on whether you're wearing light armor, medium armor, or heavy armor, like it is in games like New World. Finally, Vigor is a resource that is almost entirely used for casting abilities. Most hard-hitting or powerful abilities in Chrono Odyssey will require some vigor in order to be able to use, but as with stamina, this vigor passively regenerates over time. Now with both the Berserker and Swordsman classes, vigor is instead replaced with rage. Unlike vigor, rage starts at 0 instead of 100 and will not regenerate over time, but you can build it up with basic attacks and certain abilities. Sort of, you can think of vigor as a builder-spender sort of system. Some buffs and debuffs you'll see shared across all weapons in Chrono Odyssey include super armor, knockdown, knockback, and stun. I think all of these are pretty much what you'd expect them to be, maybe with the exception of super armor. This is basically a buff that prevents you from being staggered or interrupted while it's active, but other CC buffs can still disable you. For my New World friends, you can kind of think of this as grit. The Berserker is a melee DPS class with some tanking options and has access to the Chain Blades, Dual Axes, and Battle Axe. Now, upon first glance, the Chain Blades and Dual Axes might seem like the same weapon, but the Chain Blades do a little bit less damage but have more range. Chain Blades also have access to 2 unique mechanics. One is Bloodthirst. This is a stacking buff. 1 stack of Bloodthirst will give you 0.5% HP regeneration over 12 seconds, and also a 10% attack increase. Now this buff, Bloodthirst, does stack up to 5 times, so you can get a 50% attack increase and a total of 2.5% HP regeneration, again, over 12 seconds. Several abilities within the Chainblade skill tree will reference the number of Bloodthirst stacks you have. So more stacks typically gives you more damage, or allows the ability to apply some extra CC, something like that. Now the special move with the Chain Blades, and special moves by the way is basically just activated by pressing right mouse button, The special move will consume the total number of stacks you have and give you a fairly sizable heal. This can be up to 35% if you are at 5 stacks or more of Bloodthirst. The other mechanic with the Chain Blades is Chill, and this is pretty straightforward. It's a debuff that stacks up to 3 times. Each stack reduces movement speed by 4%, and it lasts for 24 seconds. Now, if you apply 3 stacks of Chill to an enemy, they become frozen and will take some damage and be completely frozen for 5 seconds. Moving over to the dual axes, these are a much more aggressive weapon. So they have a shorter range, but generally do a lot more damage, and they rotate a lot around the Berserk mechanic. Berserk is the special move, so again, you can activate this by pressing right mouse button, and it can be toggled on and off at the cost of 40 stamina. While in Berserk, you'll lose 1% HP per second, but you gain a 20% increase in damage and movement speed. Many abilities within the dual axis skill tree will have additional benefits for them if you're casting them while you're in Berserk, like reduced cooldown, more damage. You guys get the idea. Another mechanic the dual axes use is the Bleed debuff. Bleed deals 7% damage every 2 seconds for 15 seconds and can stack up to 5 times. On top of this, it also reduces the enemy's defense by 10%. However, I do not believe that this aspect of Bleed stacks. Just as it is with Berserk, there are also certain dual axe abilities that will gain additional power and effects when you're attacking an enemy that is affected by a Bleed debuff. Now, one standout ability with the dual axes that makes this weapon completely insane is called Immortal. This is a self buff that you can apply that prevents your HP from falling below 1, which stops you from dying, and it lasts for a whopping 12 seconds. Now, it does have a 150-second cooldown, but this can be lowered with the Immortal 2 upgrade, which knocks 3 seconds off of the ability's cooldown every time you land your final attack in a chain of 3 attacks, which is standard for every weapon within Chrono Odyssey. The Battle Axe is a much slower but harder hitting Berserker weapon. Unlike Chain Blades and Dual Axes, its special move is simply just a block, but there are certain passives which will reward you for blocking enemy attacks. Like Dual Axes, Battle Axe also makes use of the Bleed debuff, but it has its own special mechanic in the form of Whirlwind stacks. Whirlwind is a self buff that increases your attack by 7% for 10 seconds, and this can stack up to 5 times. You'll find abilities on the left-hand side of the skill tree that both build these stacks and gain additional effects when you have the stacks. Battle Axe also gains access to Taunt through the Taunting Shift passive and the Executioner's Call ability. To complement these taunts, Battle Axe has a bunch of passives that reduce incoming damage, and an ability called Blood Veil, which provides a shield equal to a percentage of your HP, and of course the ability to block some incoming damage with its right mouse button, or its special move. For Berserker's class mastery, you'll be able to choose 1 additional passive at level 10, either Warrior's Spirit, which increases your attack the lower your HP is, or Raging Storm, which allows you to generate rage much faster, provided your current rage is below 50%. At level 15, you'll be able to choose 1 of 3 different active abilities, and as with the passive, this can be used regardless of which weapons you choose. The ability choices are as follows: Avatar, which for 20 seconds turns off your other abilities, but makes every basic attack a hard-hitting punch that restores 3% HP, and you can press right mouse button, or special move, to knock back the enemy at the cost of some stamina. Quaking Impact allows you to throw a big rock at the enemy for a big chunk of damage and a 5-second stun, and Explosive Rage is a forward leap attack that can knock back and then knock down enemies, generating rage if you're able to land both parts of the attack. The final class mastery passive you'll be able to choose in the beta is unlocked at level 20, and you can choose either Crimson Frenzy or Dominating Presence. Crimson Frenzy allows you to apply bleed stacks to enemies affected by knockdown, knockback, or stun, and Dominating Presence reduces the attack of nearby enemies whenever you use an ability. This can stack up to 5 times for a total of 50% attack reduction for 5 seconds. To summarize the Berserker weapons, I would say that Chain Blades lend themselves more to a solo sustain playstyle, with the Bloodthirst restoring health, and then the chill, freezing the enemies, stopping them attacking. Dual Axes are just for all-out damage, get in there, get your HP low, just go wild. And then Battle Axe functions as more of like an off-tank, frontline bruiser type weapon. As we covered in the intro, the Swordsman currently functions as the best option for tanking in Chrono Odyssey's upcoming June beta. The weapons available to this class are the Greatsword, Sword and Shield, and Dual Blades. The Dual Blades are a hybrid DPS tank weapon and will definitely be the best option to pair with Sword and Shield if you want to go full tank. Its unique mechanic is the shock effect, which through certain passives and abilities, can place a debuff on the enemy that lasts 15 seconds. When attacking an enemy affected with the shock debuff, you have a 10% chance to trigger a lightning strike, which does some damage and lowers their stagger resistance. Now, shock can stack up to 99 times, and each stack increases the chance you will trigger a lightning strike, and each stack will also lower their stagger resistance even more so. Dual Blade's special move, or its right mouse button, is simply just a block, like with the Berserker's Great Axe. This block can be used to lower cooldowns of your abilities when you are using the Deflect passive. You can also taunt enemies with the Dual Blades using the Swift Assault ability, again making it a really good offhand option for swordsman tanks. Similar to the Berserker's Battle Axe, the Greatsword is a slower, harder hitting weapon capable of huge burst and massive AoE cleave. Its special move is Charge Slash. Holding down right mouse button will charge up a powerful attack, increasing in strength the longer you hold the ability, up to a cap of 4 seconds. Unlike most of the class weapons, Greatsword doesn't have any mechanics that are unique to it, but almost every ability will apply some form of knockback, knockdown, or stun. It also has several abilities that can apply bleed, and is currently the only weapon that has access to hyper armor, which you can get through the Warrior's Draw passive in the middle skill tree. The Sword and Shield is one of the tankiest weapons in Chrono Odyssey currently, with many abilities and passives that taunt, increase threat generation, and provide damage reduction. It's also one of 2 total weapons in the beta that can apply buffs to nearby allies. Battle Cry, with its final upgrade, will increase the defense of yourself and other nearby friendlies by 80% for 10 seconds. The special move of the Sword and Shield is Block, and as you guessed it, it blocks incoming damage at the cost of stamina. A unique aspect of this particular weapon's block, though, you can time your block to trigger a counterattack, and any basic attack performed after a block gains additional damage and applies knockdown to enemies. Sword and Shield is also the only current weapon that has access to Thorns, or damage reduction. Through the use of the fully upgraded Indomitable Cry ability, you can reflect 50% of incoming damage back to enemies for the 10-second duration that the buff lasts. Swordsman's class mastery allows you to choose either Decimate or Guardian Shield as a passive at level 10. Decimate increases the damage you do and makes it easier to deplete an enemy's stagger meter, whilst Guardian Shield gives you a stacking buff whenever you block an attack. This buff increases your crit resistance and incoming healing. Now, whenever you land an ability, you'll spend these stacks of Guardian Shield in order to heal yourself, up to a total of 10% for 5 stacks. At level 15, you'll be able to choose one of 3 different active abilities. Warcry fills your rage meter and generates additional rage for the next 15 seconds. Absolute Defense allows your blocks to completely negate all incoming damage and reduces the stamina cost for blocking entirely for the 15 seconds that the buff lasts. Unyielding Will gives you super armor and a 5% HP return on every attack you connect to an enemy for the 15-second duration that the buff lasts. Finally, at level 20, you'll be able to choose between Fervor or the Last Stand passive. Fervor is a buff that stacks up to 3 times and is gained when landing basic attacks on the enemy. Each stack of Fervor increases the damage of your abilities by 10% and lasts 15 seconds. And when you land a damaging ability on an enemy, you'll spend those Fervor stacks to proc additional damage, up to a total of 90% for 3 stacks. Last Stand simply reduces incoming damage by 50% for 5 seconds when you drop below 30% HP. It is worth mentioning that this can only happen once every 60 seconds. To summarize the swordsman weapons and playstyle, Dual Blades can be used as either a tanking or DPS option, and allow you to burn through a boss's stagger meter very, very quickly. Greatsword is a big burst DPS weapon with a huge amount of CC, high uptime on super armor, and a large amount of AoE cleave. And Sword and Shield, as we've covered many times, is your go-to option for tanking, with some of the best damage reduction passives and taunts in the game currently. The Ranger is the only class that has access to consistent range damage in the upcoming beta on June 20th. Unlike the Swordsman and Berserker, the Ranger does not use Rage to cast abilities, but instead the default resource known as Vigor. The weapons available to this class are bow, crossbow, and rapier. The crossbow is a high DPS range weapon and differs from the bow in that it has a shorter effective range, but a much higher attack speed. The crossbow's left-hand side skill tree revolves around building stacks of precision. Precision is a buff that increases your crit rate by 3% for 5 seconds, and can stack up to 10 times. The right-hand side of the crossbow skill tree uses the debuff Spirit Venom. Now, this can be applied in a bunch of different forms. You have Venom Shot, Scorpion Poison, Spider Poison, and Root Poison. They all do varying amounts of damage over time. Some ignore enemies' defenses or lower their attack, and the Root Poison in particular can reduce movement speed, immobilize, or even stun. The special move, the right mouse button for the crossbow, is Trick Shot. This either causes your character to front flip, back flip, or do a barrel roll, depending on what direction you're moving in, and whilst performing this move, you'll also unleash a barrage of arrows, again, at the cost of stamina. The Rapier is the Ranger's only melee weapon, and like crossbow, it can apply poison to the enemy with certain abilities, causing damage over time. It can also apply Mark to an enemy with the counterattack ability specifically. Mark increases the damage that enemy takes by 10% from everyone for 8 seconds. On top of this, the Ranger can also buff themselves and nearby allies' attack by 20% for 15 seconds using the Blade Song ability. The special move for Rapier is Charging Thrust, which is kind of like a dodge that also does damage to anything in the way. Passives in the middle skill tree can allow Charging Thrust to apply poison or stun enemies when it crits. And finally, we have the bow. This is, in my opinion, one of the most complicated weapons in Chrono Odyssey due to the additional resource of arrows. On the right-hand side skill tree of the bow, most abilities will require an arrow to cast them instead of vigor. Now, arrows are a resource. I think you get about 5 or 6 of them. We'll see on the screen. And these are replenished over time and can be gained quicker through certain passives and abilities. Holding down the Alt key with the bow equipped allows you to select an arrow type, which then modifies the abilities on the right-hand side skill tree. Currently, the arrow types you can select are Impact Arrow, which is the default normal arrow. Then there's Flaming Arrow, Frost Arrow, Poison Arrow, and Explosive Arrow. These all apply effects similar to what we've seen from other weapons' abilities. For example, Frost Arrow applies Chill, slowing movement speed and freezing the enemy at 3 stacks, just as it is with the Berserker's Chain Blades. The special move with the bow allows you to aim down sights and charge up an arrow of your choice. The longer you hold your knocked arrow, the more damage it does and the further it travels, and the more stacks of burn or poison or chill, depending on your arrow type that you've selected, the more stacks it will apply. So yeah, pull back the bow for longer, does more damage, goes further, applies more elemental damage. For what it's worth, the left-hand side skill tree of the bow is a bit more straightforward. You know, those are just like, you shoot an arrow, it does some damage, or you shoot like 3 arrows, it does damage. They just use vigor. But yeah, the right-hand side skill tree, quite involved, where you need to choose a different element, using arrows, replenishing arrows, and then you've got your vigor and all of the sort of standard stuff you would expect on the left. So if you want a more simplistic way to play bow, you can just focus on the left-hand side skill tree. But the right-hand side skill tree, with the elements, with the arrows, I think it's a little bit complicated, especially when you look at the abilities. It's kind of a bit overwhelming. Now, moving on to the class mastery, the Ranger gets a choice of either increased dodge distance or increased jump distance when you hit level 10. For level 15, the 3 different active abilities you can choose from are Wind Step Strike, Wind Dance, or Verdant Snare. Wind Step Strike is a 2-part damaging ability that kicks the enemy and then shoots them, causing knockback. But if you use this ability while you're moving backwards, it can be used to create distance between you and your target. Wind Dance increases the damage of your special move with either bow, rapier, or crossbow, whilst reducing the cost of dodges by 50% for the 15-second duration that Wind Dance is active. Verdant Snare summons a big bunch of tree roots which immobilize the enemy for 5 seconds, and it does a small chunk of damage to them. At level 20, the passive choices for the Ranger are either Fruit of Perseverance, which increases attack while you stand still, or Evasive Gale, which damages nearby enemies and reduces their movement speed when you dodge within 5 meters of them. Although I didn't play much Ranger during the preview event, the general consensus seems to be that the bow is currently a weaker performing weapon than the crossbow or the rapier, likely due to scaling issues, where in the early game, it just doesn't hit hard enough to warrant using. That being said, bow does give you longer range damage options than any other weapon we can currently use in Chrono Odyssey, and it has some pretty big AoE damage with explosive arrows and curve shot, and also the arrow shower abilities. So friends, that is currently all the classes and weapons that will be available to play in the upcoming beta for Chrono Odyssey, which is again on the 20th of June. If you want to be a big tanky boy, my recommendation is to go Swordsman and run the Sword and Shield and Dual Blades as your weapon options. For maximum DPS in PvE, it's very likely the best option will be Ranger, with Crossbow and Rapier as the weapon choices. But my personal favorite class in combo is Berserker, using the Dual Axes and Battle Axe. The movement speed, the immortality, the spin to win nature of the build, something I really found fun during the preview, and I'm honestly considering playing it again in the beta. I know I should probably play some other classes, but it was super fun. I would highly recommend checking it out if you're not too worried about like meta or doing as much damage or being like a proper tank. Yeah, Berserker, Dual Axes, Battle Axe was a lot of fun. But let me know what class and weapon combo you guys are thinking about playing in this upcoming beta. And of course, if we learn anything about the Sorcerer, the Paladin, the Assassin, the weapons that they have available, I'll be sure to have a video on that topic here on the channel as soon as we know. So if you guys would like to see that video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'll catch you guys all in the next video.